The number. There is a number attached to your name. It's not your age, not your phone number. It's a three-digit score from 300 to 850. And this number has more power over your life than your diploma, your resume, or even your vote. You may not think about it every day. You may not even know what it is right now. But it thinks about you. It follows you. It decides if you get the apartment. It sets the price of your car insurance. It can even be the silent reason you don't get the job. You think you live in a world of free choices, but your most important life decisions are being filtered through this single, invisible gate. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. This number is generated by a secret formula. A proprietary black box algorithm you are not allowed to see, whose logic you are not allowed to question. We built this system to escape the bias of human judgment, to create a fair, objective, mathematical standard of trust. But what happens when the machine becomes the new gatekeeper? How did we willingly grant an algorithm the power to define our worth? This is the story of the FICO score, and how a simple protocol for measuring risk became the invisible architecture of a new social order. The world before the number. Before the algorithm, before the instant approval or the soul-crushing denial, there was a room. And in that room there was a man. To understand the world that the FICO score conquered, you first have to understand the world that existed in its absence. Imagine it's 1960. You and your spouse want to buy your first house. You don't fill out an online form. You don't get a decision in 60 seconds. Instead, you make an appointment. You put on your best clothes. You walk into the imposing stone facade of the local bank, a place that feels more like a cathedral of commerce than a simple business. You sit, hands folded, across a heavy oak desk from a man who likely knows your father and maybe even your grandfather. He is the loan officer, but in this world his real title is gatekeeper. He would ask you about your job, of course, but his questions would quickly stray from the financial. Where did you go to church? Who were your parents? How long had your family lived in this town? He was not just assessing your income. He was assessing your stability, your reputation, your social standing. He was performing a subjective, deeply personal calculation of your character. This was the central pillar of the old trust architecture. Lending was a handshake deal built on reputation. Your creditworthiness wasn't a number in a database. It was a story, a collection of local knowledge and gossip held in the collective mind of the community and interpreted by this one man. In a small, static town, this system had a certain logic. It was a form of social collateral. If you defaulted, you weren't just losing money. You were losing face. You were betraying a personal trust, and the social consequences could be more severe than the financial ones. There is a certain nostalgia for this era. It feels more human. It feels like a time when you were seen as a person, not a data point. But this nostalgia obscures a much darker and more dysfunctional reality. The humanity of the character loan was a double-edged sword, and for millions of people it was not a comfort but a cage. The loan officer's gut feeling, his personal assessment of your character, was a perfect black box for his own biases. The logic was entirely opaque. If he denied your loan, he didn't have to provide a data-driven reason. He could just say he had a bad feeling. And that feeling, more often than not, was just a mask for the prevailing prejudices of the time. If you were a woman, you would often be denied a loan without a male cosigner, regardless of your income. The prevailing character assessment was that women were not reliable financial agents. If you were a person of color, you would be subjected to redlining, a practice where your address, your neighborhood, was used as a proxy to deny you capital, effectively locking you out of the primary engine of American wealth creation, homeownership. This wasn't a bug in the system, it was a feature. The character loan was an incredibly effective tool for enforcing the existing social hierarchy. It ensured that capital flowed along pre-approved social lines, reinforcing the status quo. The gatekeeper wasn't just protecting the bank's money. He was protecting a specific vision of society. Beyond its deep-seated social problems, this system was also profoundly inefficient. It was an anchor dragging on a modern, booming, post-war economy. The first major issue was its inability to scale. A system based on personal relationships and local knowledge simply cannot function in a large, mobile nation. By the 1960s and 70s, Americans were moving more than ever before. A family might move from Ohio to California for a new job. When they arrived, they had no local reputation. The banker in Lowe's Angels had no way of knowing their character. He couldn't call their pastor or their father. They were strangers, and in the old system, a stranger was a risk by default. The economy was becoming national, but the architecture of trust was still stuck in the village. This created immense friction. The second issue was speed. The demand for credit was exploding. The American dream was being sold on the installment plan: a new car, a new refrigerator, a new television. This required a fast, efficient system for issuing consumer credit. The slow, deliberate, interview-based process of the character loan was a bottleneck. It couldn't handle the volume. Lenders who wanted to grow, who wanted to operate beyond the borders of a single town, faced a massive problem. How do you trust a stranger? How do you make thousands or even millions of lending decisions a month without personally interviewing every single applicant? The economy was screaming for a new protocol. It needed a universal language for risk that could be spoken from coast to coast. It needed a system that was fast, cheap, and could travel over a telephone wire. It needed a way to abstract a person's trustworthiness into a simple, portable, standardized format. The pressure was immense. The market was demanding a solution, and any solution, even an imperfect one, would be better than the biased, slow, and collapsing system of the past. Society was ready to trade the tyranny of the gatekeeper's gut feeling for the cold, impartial logic of a number. They were about to get it. Forging a protocol for trust. The solution to the chaos of human trust didn't come from a bank, a government committee, or a philosopher. It came from two men in San Francisco with a background in operations research and engineering. In 1956, Bill Fair and Earl Isaac founded a company with a deceptively simple name: Fair, Isaac and Company. They weren't bankers. They were mathematicians. They looked at the problem of lending not as a question of character, but as a question of statistics. And this shift in perspective was everything. To them, the loan officer's gut feeling was not just biased. It was noisy, inefficient, and fundamentally unscientific. They believed that buried within the vast, messy history of millions of past loans was a clear, mathematical signal. They believed they could replace the art of lending with the science of prediction. Their core insight was revolutionary for its time. They argued that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. It sounds obvious now, but in an era of character loans, it was a radical departure. They posed a simple question. Instead of asking a loan officer if a person asterisk seems asterisk trustworthy, what if we could look at the records of 1 million people who looked just like them on paper and see what percentage of those people actually paid their loans back? It was an actuarial approach to risk, the same logic that life insurance companies used to predict mortality. You don't know when any single individual will die, but you can predict with astonishing accuracy how many 100,000 45-year-old men will die in the next year. Fair and Isaac wanted to apply that same statistical power to financial life. To do this, they needed data, lots of it, and this is where the groundwork had already been laid. For decades, a fragmented network of local credit bureaus had been operating across the country. These were essentially libraries of financial gossip. They collected data from local merchants. Did you pay your department store bill, your milkman, your doctor? They compiled this information into files, creating a financial fingerprint for millions of Americans. But this data was disorganized, localized, and hard to interpret. A file from a bureau in Chicago looked completely different from one in Miami. There was no standard. It was a collection of facts without a common language. Fair and Isaac saw this raw, unstructured data not as a problem, but as the raw material for their machine. Their genius was to create a system that could ingest this chaos and output a single, elegant, and universally understandable signal: the score. The FICO score, first introduced in the late 50s but not widely adopted until later, was the ultimate act of abstraction. It took a complex human life, your late payments, your new accounts, the length of your credit history, and distilled it into a single, three-digit number. This number was a probability statement. It was a cold, calculated prediction of the likelihood that you would become 90 days delinquent on a loan within the next 24 months. It made no claims about your character, your morality, or your worth as a human being. It was simply a risk assessment. And in doing so, it created something the American economy desperately needed: a protocol. In technology, a protocol is just a set of rules that allows different systems to communicate with each other. The TCP/IP protocol, for example, allows a computer in Brazil to talk to a server in Japan. It's a shared language. The FICO score became the shared language for financial risk. For the first time, a lender in New York could look at the file of an applicant from California and understand their creditworthiness in less than a second. The number 720 meant the same thing in both places. It was a standardized, interoperable, and incredibly efficient system for communicating trust. It allowed the lending market to finally break free from the constraints of geography. It was the lubricant that enabled the massive expansion of national credit card companies, auto lenders, and mortgage brokers. It removed the friction of the unknown. From a purely technical perspective, it was a utopian solution. It promised to replace the messy, biased world of the loan officer with a system that was objective, impartial, and democratic. The algorithm didn't know your race. It didn't know your gender. It didn't care who your father was. It only cared about the data. On paper, this was the fulfillment of a promise, a world where you would be judged not by who you are, but by what you do. The early FICO score was an engine of financial inclusion for many who had been systematically locked out of the old system. It opened up access to capital on an unprecedented scale. And for the banks, it was a miracle. It turned the slow, expensive, and risky business of lending into a fast, cheap, and predictable industrial process. They could now make more loans faster, with lower risk than ever before. It was a classic case of technological solutionism. A complex social problem, who to trust with money, was solved by a beautiful and elegant piece of engineering. But in abstracting away the messiness of human life, in converting character into a calculation, something was lost. Or rather, something was hidden. The system worked so well, was so efficient, and removed so much friction that for decades, almost no one thought to look inside the box. The perfect black box. The power of the FICO score protocol was not just in its speed or its scale. It was in its authority, and that authority was derived from a single, critical design choice: its secrecy. The inner workings of the FICO algorithm are one of the most closely guarded trade secrets in modern finance. It is a perfect black box. We know the ingredients that go into it, but we do not know the recipe. FICO is transparent about the general categories of information it considers. Roughly 35% of your score is based on payment history, simple stuff. Do you pay your bills on time? Another 30% is based on amounts owed or your credit utilization. How much of your available credit are you using? 15% is the length of your credit history. Older accounts are generally better. 10% is your credit mix. A healthy variety of credit types like a mortgage, an auto loan, and credit cards is seen as a positive. And the final 10% is new credit. How many new accounts have you opened recently? This seems straightforward enough. It gives the consumer a sense of control, a feeling that they understand the rules of the game. But this transparency is a carefully constructed illusion. The crucial information is not the categories themselves, but the weighting. How much does one late payment hurt you compared to opening two new credit cards? How does the algorithm weigh a $5,000 credit card balance against a $200,000 mortgage? What are the thousands of smaller variables, the so-called reason codes, that nudge your score up or down? That is the secret sauce. The specific formula, the complex interplay between these factors, is completely opaque. And this opacity was not an accident or a flaw. From the very beginning, it was the central feature of the entire system. The black box was a brilliant piece of social and economic engineering. Its primary function was to prevent gaming. If the exact formula were public, a cottage industry of score optimizers would immediately emerge, teaching people how to manipulate their data to produce a higher score without actually changing their underlying financial behavior. The score would cease to be an honest signal of risk and would instead become a measure of how well you could play the game. Secrecy maintained the integrity of the signal. It forced people to focus on good behavior in general, paying bills on time, keeping balances low, rather than exploiting loopholes in the code. In this sense, the opacity was a necessary evil to keep the system honest. Furthermore, the black box design was essential for its adoption by the banks. For a lender, the FICO score was magical. They didn't need to understand the complex statistics behind it. They didn't need to hire their own data scientists. They could simply buy the number. It was a clean, simple, authoritative output from a trusted source. It was a classic example of reducing friction. The complexity was hidden, bundled away inside the box, allowing for a seamless user experience on the other end. The lender gets a number, the applicant gets a yes or a no. Fast, simple. The hidden complexity made the entire process feel objective and authoritative, almost like a law of nature. The number wasn't an opinion, it was a fact, delivered by a mysterious and powerful oracle. This gave lenders a powerful shield. If they denied someone a loan, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't personal. It was the score. The algorithm made the decision. This diffusion of responsibility was incredibly seductive. But in exchange for this incredible efficiency and perceived objectivity, society made a trade. A profound, almost invisible trade. We gave up the right to an explanation. In the old world, if the loan officer denied you, you could look him in the eye and ask why. His answer might be biased or unjust, but there was a human in the loop. There was a conversation to be had, an appeal to be made. With the score, there is no one to ask. You are denied because the number is 640 and the cutoff is 680. Why is your number 640? The answer is a string of cryptic reason codes. Amount owed on revolving accounts is too high. Time since delinquency is too recent. These are not explanations, they are outputs. They tell you what the algorithm saw, but not how it weighed it. They don't explain the logic. You cannot cross-examine the algorithm. You cannot ask it to reconsider. The protocol is the protocol. The trust architecture was no longer based on human relationships, but on unquestioning faith in a proprietary calculation. We outsourced the messy, complicated, and deeply human process of judging one another to a machine, and we agreed not to ask how the machine arrived at its conclusions. For decades, this trade seemed like a bargain. The convenience was undeniable. The increase in access to credit was real. The system worked. But a system of judgment without transparency, a system of power without appeal, creates a dangerous new kind of authority. One that is silent, pervasive, and unaccountable. Mission creep, the score escapes the bank. For the first few decades of its existence, the FICO score stayed within its intended habitat. It was a specialized tool used by a specific industry for a single purpose: predicting loan default. Its adoption began with smaller consumer loans in the 1960s, then expanded dramatically in the 70s and 80s as the great credit card boom took off. By the early 90s, with the advent of powerful computer systems, it became the gold standard for auto loans and, eventually, the multi-trillion-dollar mortgage industry. This expansion was logical. In each case, the score was being used to answer the question it was designed to answer. How likely is this person to pay back this debt? It was a powerful and effective protocol operating within its design parameters. But successful technologies rarely stay in their lane. The very qualities that made the score so attractive to lenders, its speed, its simplicity, its illusion of objectivity, made it incredibly tempting to everyone else. And this is where the story takes a critical turn. This is where the protocol escapes the lab. The first signs of this mission creep came from a closely related industry, insurance. In the mid-90s, insurance companies began experimenting with credit-based insurance scores. Their logic was based on a statistical correlation. Their data showed that people with lower credit scores tended to file more claims. The correlation was real, but the causal link was murky at best. Does a low score mean you're an irresponsible person who is also a bad driver? Or does it mean you are financially stressed, and therefore more likely to file a small claim that a wealthier person might pay out of pocket? Or does it mean you live in a neighborhood with higher crime rates and worse roads, factors that are themselves correlated with lower average incomes and scores? The insurers didn't care about the why. The correlation was strong enough. So they began using the score, or a version of it, to set premiums for auto and home insurance. Suddenly, a late payment on a credit card could increase your car insurance rates, even if you had a perfect driving record. The score was no longer just predicting your ability to repay a loan. It was being used as a proxy for your future behavior as a driver or homeowner. This opened the floodgates. Once one industry demonstrated that the score could be used as a general-purpose responsibility metric, others quickly followed. Landlords began using it to screen tenants. A low score, they reasoned, might mean an applicant would be late with the rent. It was an easy, cheap way to sort through a pile of applications, far simpler than calling previous landlords or verifying employment. The score became a key to housing. Then came the utility companies. To get your lights turned on or to get a cell phone, you were suddenly subjected to a credit check. If your score was too low, you might be required to pay a hefty security deposit, a significant burden for someone already struggling financially. The logic was circular. To prove you could be trusted to pay your future bills, you had to pay a large bill up front. Perhaps the most alarming leap was into the world of employment. A growing number of employers, particularly for positions in finance or management, began running credit checks as part of the hiring process. Their stated rationale was that an employee with a good credit history is more trustworthy and less likely to commit fraud or theft. There is very little data to support this claim, but in the absence of other simple metrics, the score became a convenient and legally permitted character reference. Think about the profound shift this represents. The FICO score, a protocol designed to predict the specific outcome of a 90-day loan delinquency over 24 months, was now being used to answer one of the most complex and nuanced questions imaginable. Who is a good person? Who is a responsible employee? Who is a worthy tenant? This was a catastrophic category error. It was like using a thermometer to measure the height of a building. The tool was being used for a purpose for which it was never designed, and the consequences were immense. The score was becoming a form of digital caste. It was creating a new class of gatekeepers who were using the number to grant or deny access to the fundamental necessities of modern life. A place to live, a way to communicate, a job, affordable insurance. And unlike the lone officer of the past, these new gatekeepers were invisible. The decision was rendered by an automated system. The rejection was impersonal, and the reason was always the same: the number. The seductive power of the score was its friction-free nature. For a landlord, an insurer, or an HR department, it was a magical shortcut. It replaced the difficult, time-consuming, and legally risky work of human judgment with a simple, seemingly objective, numerical output. Why interview 3 past employers when you can just look at a number? Why assess a person's entire driving history when this score gives you a neat little probability? The score offered a clean, simple answer to a messy, complicated question. And in a world that craves efficiency, the path of least resistance always wins. The problem is that in this process of simplification, all context is stripped away. The score doesn't know you lost your job due to a recession. It doesn't know you had a medical emergency that resulted in massive bills. It doesn't know you were the victim of a financial scam. It only knows the data points. The number becomes the whole story. What began as an elegant mathematical tool for bankers had metastasized into a universal arbiter of character, silently and invisibly restructuring the rules of access and opportunity in our society. The algorithmic looking glass. When a system of measurement becomes powerful enough, it ceases to simply measure reality. It begins to change it. This is a well-known phenomenon, sometimes called Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And this is precisely what happened to the FICO score. As consumers gradually became aware of this invisible number and its immense power over their lives, their relationship with money began to fundamentally change. They were no longer just managing their finances, they were managing their score. A powerful and deeply strange feedback loop was created. The algorithm was watching, and humanity began to perform for it. This performance manifests in a series of behaviors that are often financially illogical, but make perfect sense if your primary goal is to please the black box. Consider the paradox of building credit. To prove you are responsible with debt, you must first go into debt. A young person with no loans, no credit cards, and a consistent history of saving is a ghost in the system. They are credit invisible. To the FICO algorithm, they are not a low risk. They are an unknown risk, which is almost as bad. So, the conventional advice is to get a credit card, even if you don't need one, and make small purchases that you immediately pay off. You are taking on a liability and creating administrative work for yourself, not for any immediate financial benefit, but purely as a ritual to make yourself visible and legible to the scoring protocol. You are generating the data that the system needs to judge you. Or consider the strange attachment we develop to old, unused credit accounts. Sensible financial management might suggest closing an account you haven't used in 5 years to simplify your life. But the algorithm penalizes this. One of the factors it measures is the average age of your accounts. Closing an old account can lower that average and cause your score to drop. So, millions of people keep these ghost accounts open, creating a kind of digital clutter in their financial lives, purely to appease a rule in the code they don't fully understand. We become curators of a financial history designed to be aesthetically pleasing to the machine. Then there is the fear of the hard inquiry. When you apply for a loan, the lender makes a formal request to see your credit file, and this inquiry is logged. Too many hard inquiries in a short period can lower your score, because it might signal to the algorithm that you are desperate for cash. This creates a chilling effect. People become afraid to shop around for the best interest rates on a mortgage or car loan, fearing that the very act of looking will damage their score and result in them getting a worse offer. The system that was meant to increase market efficiency creates a friction that discourages competitive behavior. What's happening here is a profound sociological shift. The FICO score has become an algorithmic looking glass. We gaze into it to see our financial selves, but the reflection we see staring back is the algorithm's ideal. And we instinctively begin to groom ourselves, to change our behavior, to better match that ideal. The score is no longer a passive reflection of our creditworthiness. It has become an active and powerful force that shapes our financial reality. It is a form of governance. It nudges, disciplines, and rewards us, subtly coercing us into a specific model of economic citizenship. The good citizen in the FICO world is not someone who is debt-free. The good citizen is someone who skillfully manages multiple lines of credit over a long period, keeping their utilization low, never missing a payment, and not asking for too much new credit too quickly. The system teaches us, through the simple reinforcement of a rising or falling number, how to behave. This is a powerful form of self-surveillance. We internalize the gaze of the algorithm. We begin to think like it, to anticipate its judgments. Before making a financial decision, we might ask ourselves, how will this look on my credit report? This question is the sound of the feedback loop closing. The protocol is no longer just a tool used by banks. It has become a voice in our heads, a silent co-author of our financial lives. The map has become the territory. The original goal was to create a score that accurately reflected the reality of a person's financial habits. But we have now entered a world where people are actively curating their financial habits to create a score that accurately reflects the algorithm's desires. The tool we built to predict our future is now redesigning it. The ghost in the machine, digital redlining. The single most powerful selling point of the FICO score was its promise of objectivity. The algorithm, we were told, was colorblind. It didn't know your name, your neighborhood, or the color of your skin. It judged you purely on the numbers. For decades, this was the central defense of the system. It was a machine, and machines don't have prejudices. This argument is clean, simple, and profoundly wrong. The FICO score did not eliminate bias from the lending process. It simply laundered it. It took the messy, obvious, and legally problematic prejudices of the past and encoded them into a seemingly neutral system, creating a new, more insidious form of discrimination: digital redlining. To understand how this works, you have to understand a fundamental truth about any predictive algorithm. It is a product of the data it is trained on. An algorithm is not intelligent in the human sense. It is a history-digesting machine. It looks at the past to learn patterns that it can then use to make predictions about the future. And if the past it is looking at is fundamentally unequal, the future it predicts will inevitably be a reflection of that inequality. The FICO algorithm was trained on decades of American financial data, a history that was deeply shaped by discriminatory practices like the very redlining it was supposed to replace. For generations, minority communities were systematically denied access to mainstream financial products. They were less likely to get mortgages, less likely to be approved for credit cards, and often forced into predatory, high-interest loans. As a result, their collective credit files looked different. They were thinner, with shorter credit histories and a different mix of credit types. When the FICO algorithm ingested this historical data, it learned these patterns. It didn't learn that a particular group was being discriminated against. It just learned that, statistically, people from certain backgrounds with certain types of credit profiles were more likely to default. The algorithm cannot understand context. It cannot comprehend the history of systemic racism or economic injustice. It just sees correlations in the data. And so, it builds a model that reflects those correlations. The result is a system that can perpetuate the effects of past discrimination without ever directly referencing a protected category like race. This is the mechanics of digital redlining. The algorithm doesn't use your race as an input. That would be illegal under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974. Instead, It uses proxies. These are data points that, on the surface, appear neutral, but are so highly correlated with race and socioeconomic status that they function as a stand-in. For example, the model might find that people who rely on credit from smaller finance companies rather than major banks are a higher risk. This seems like a neutral financial observation. But historically, minority communities were often excluded from mainstream banking and had no choice but to use these alternative lenders. So, a variable that appears to be about the asterisk type of credit is, in effect, a proxy for the race and class of the borrower. The algorithm isn't racist, but it is trained on the results of a racist system, and so it learns how to be racist in a statistically defensible, legally compliant way. This creates a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Because a community has been historically disadvantaged, its members have, on average, lower credit scores. Because they have lower credit scores, they are denied access to affordable credit or are charged higher interest rates. This makes it more difficult for them to build wealth, to buy homes, to start businesses, and to escape financial precarity. This, in turn, reinforces the very data patterns that led to the lower scores in the first place. The algorithm looks at the results of this cycle and confirms its original prediction. See, I told you they were a higher risk. The system validates itself. It takes a historical inequality, bakes it into a mathematical model, and then uses that model to justify and extend that same inequality into the future, all under the guise of objective, data-driven risk management. This is the ghost in the machine. The promise of the black box was that it would be a neutral oracle, free from human flaws. But we forgot that the machine was built by humans and trained on human history. We fed the oracle a diet of poisoned data, and then we were surprised when its prophecies were cursed. The FICO score became a way for the financial system to have its cake and eat it too. It could continue to produce racially disparate outcomes while claiming its hands were clean. The bias was no longer in the mind of the loan officer. It was embedded in the code itself, hidden behind a wall of proprietary secrecy, operating at a scale and speed that made it almost impossible to challenge. It was the perfect crime, an act of discrimination with no single human perpetrator to blame. The architecture of a caste system. When you synthesize everything we've discussed, the invention of a universal trust protocol, its nature as an unexplainable black box, its escape from the world of banking, its power to reshape our behavior, and its ability to encode historical bias, you arrive at a sobering conclusion. The FICO score is no longer just a financial tool. It has become something far more powerful. It is the silent, invisible operating system for a new American social hierarchy. It is the architecture of a credit caste system. This system sorts us, ranks us, and assigns us to different tiers of society, each with its own set of rules, its own costs, and its own opportunities. At the top are the prime and super prime. These are the individuals with scores typically above 720. For this Brahmin class, the system is almost invisible. It works for them, quietly and efficiently. They are pre-approved for the best credit cards with the richest rewards. They are offered the lowest interest rates on mortgages and auto loans, a discount that saves them hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. They pay lower premiums for insurance. They pass employment and rental checks without a second thought. For the prime, the score is not a barrier. It is a passport, granting them friction-free access to the best that the modern economy has to offer. They live in a world of low friction and high trust. Below them is the vast middle class of this system, the near prime. These are people with decent but not perfect scores. They are generally able to access credit, but it comes at a price. Their mortgage rates are a percentage point or two higher. Their credit cards have annual fees and lower limits. They are navigating the system, constantly aware of their score, performing the rituals of credit management in the hopes of one day ascending to the prime caste. They represent the striving majority, the people for whom the algorithmic looking glass is a constant companion. Then you have the subprime. These are the untouchables of the credit system, with scores below 620. For this caste, the world is a different place entirely. They are not just denied access to affordable credit, they are actively targeted by a parallel financial system of predatory lenders, payday loans, title loans, high-interest rent-to-own schemes. A simple financial shock, like a car repair or a medical bill, can send them spiraling into a debt trap from which it is nearly impossible to escape. The cost of everything is higher. They pay more for insurance, more for financing, and are often shut out of the housing and job markets altogether. The score becomes a digital brand, a mark that follows them everywhere, closing doors and limiting possibilities. And finally, there are the credit invisible, the ghosts in the machine. These tens of millions of Americans, often young, elderly, immigrant, or low income, simply do not have enough data in their files to generate a score. In a world governed by this protocol, to be invisible is to be non-existent. They cannot be trusted because they cannot be measured. They are locked out of the system before they even have a chance to play the game. What makes this a caste system and not simply a financial ranking is its rigidity. Moving up the ladder is a slow, arduous process that can take years of flawless performance, but moving down can happen in an instant. A single catastrophic event, a job loss, a divorce, a serious illness, can send your score plummeting. The algorithm is a judge without mercy. It operates without context. It does not care that you were laid off because your company downsized or that you missed a payment because you were in the hospital. The data is the data. The judgment is final. There is no appeals court for the algorithm. You cannot tell your story to the score. This is the profound difference between this new trust architecture and the flawed human system it replaced. The old loan officer might have been biased, but he could also be merciful. He could understand a story. He could grant an exception. The protocol cannot. It is a system of rules without grace, a judgment without a human face. This is the ultimate legacy of Fair and Isaac's elegant solution. In their quest to create a universal, mathematical language of trust, they inadvertently built the scaffolding for a new social order. A society where our access to opportunity is determined by a secret, proprietary algorithm. A society where we are sorted into tribes based on our ability to service debt. And a society where the story of our lives is stripped of all its human context and reduced to a single, all-powerful number. Breaking the score. The credit caste system, for all its power, is not unbreakable. The protocol is not static. We are now standing at the edge of a new era in credit scoring, driven by new technology and a growing awareness of the old system's flaws. The pressure to reform, to build a better, fairer black box, is mounting. The most significant push is towards the use of alternative data. This is the idea that our financial lives are much richer than what is captured in a traditional credit file. Proponents argue that we should incorporate on-time rent payments, utility bills, and even regular deposits into a checking account as positive signals of creditworthiness. For the tens of millions of credit invisible who pay their rent and phone bills diligently every month, this could be a revolutionary change, a way to finally become legible to the system and gain access to the mainstream economy. Companies like FICO and new fintech startups are already rolling out models like the Ultra FICO score, which allows consumers to link their bank accounts to provide this richer data. At the same time, the engine of prediction itself is changing. The relatively simple statistical models of the past are being replaced by far more powerful and complex artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. These new systems can analyze thousands of variables, drawing connections, and making predictions with a granularity that was previously unimaginable. They promise to create more accurate and more inclusive scores, finding good borrowers who were overlooked by the old models. And there is a growing, though often legally mandated, push for greater transparency, a demand for explainable AI that would allow consumers to better understand the reasons behind their score. On the surface, all of this sounds like progress. We are making the system more inclusive, more accurate, and more transparent. We are fixing the bugs. But we must ask a difficult question. Are we breaking the prison, or are we merely building a more comfortable, more efficient one? Each of these innovations carries its own profound risks. The inclusion of alternative data, while helpful for some, represents a massive expansion of financial surveillance. Do we want a world where our every transaction, our every deposit, our every bill payment is fed into a centralized scoring algorithm? Where does it stop? Will we one day incorporate our social media activity, our online shopping habits, or even our location data into our assessment of trustworthiness? A more granular system of measurement is also a more granular system of control. Similarly, the move to more complex AI models, while potentially more accurate, makes the black box even blacker. A traditional FICO model is secret, but it is, at least in theory, a static formula that a human could understand. A deep learning neural network, on the other hand, often arrives at its conclusions in ways that are opaque even to its own creators. Its internal logic can be a web of millions of weighted connections that no human can truly interpret. This presents a terrifying new challenge for accountability. How do you prove an algorithm is biased when no one, not even the company that built it, can fully explain how it works? The drive for predictive accuracy may come at the cost of any meaningful transparency. This leads us to the ultimate question. Perhaps the problem is not that we have a bad scoring system. Perhaps the problem is that we have a scoring system at all. For half a century, we have operated under the assumption that the best way to allocate opportunity is to distill a human being's worthiness down to a single, secret number. We built an entire social and economic order on this protocol. We accepted the trade-off. In exchange for the friction-free efficiency of the number, we gave up context, mercy, and transparency. But what if that trade is no longer serving us? What if the goal is not to build a better score, but to build a society that is less reliant on a single score to make its most important decisions? What if we decided that a person's access to housing, to employment, to insurance should not be determined by the same number that predicts whether they'll be late on a credit card payment? The true path forward may not be a technological one, but a philosophical one. It requires us to challenge the fundamental premise of the last 50 years and to ask, what is the price of a number? And is it one we are still willing to pay?